Dr. Mehmet Oz is a pioneering cardiothoracic surgeon and a well-known advocate for health and wellness. As a trusted voice in the medical community and beyond, he has dedicated his career to improving health outcomes and educating millions on how to live healthier lives today. We are honored to have Dr. Oz with us to discuss the future of healthcare, preventative medicine, the role of innovation in improving public health, and many, many other subjects. So, Dr. Oz, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, I appreciate it. I think the first question you should ask me is, does it help your longevity to come to Concordia events?
What do you think?
I think it does. Actually, it is truthful to say that anything that stimulates you intellectually has a benefit. You know, folks who go to college tend to live longer, sometimes years longer than folks who don't, for a lot of reasons, but some of it is being lifelong learners. And so Concordia has accomplished that. I mean, you got hundreds and hundreds of very bright people debating. This is outside the room, by the way. Inside the room, it's a whole separate group.
No, listening. But you look at how people are consuming information today. You're looking at how we are not spending as much time together as human beings. And obviously a lot of that started with the COVID pandemic. For instance, today we heard statistics from this data science talking about how the average person under the age of 30 is spending 2 hours and 45 minutes watching video algorithms on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, and you think about how that isolates people. You know, we went all digital during COVID. Wasn't great, didn't like it. We got out of it as fast as possible, back to in person by 2021, because if you don't have this, nothing works. And technology's great, but it doesn't replace.
But Matt, you have muscle memory of human contact. You have many years of being trained from childhood on, of interacting with people, looking them in the eyes, connecting without the use of a screen. And I don't buy completely that it's all about social media, although I'm well aware of its issues, and I'm involved with AI companies. Sandbox AQ is a good example. Jack Hittery's spin out from Google with Eric Schmidt. I've gotten deep into AI. I understand a lot about it now, much more than I used to. But we used to always watch a lot of screens. You know, at least our kids did. But when I was a kid, which is a generation before you, there were no screens. I still remember being allowed to watch TV because Kennedy had been assassinated. I was probably 2 or 3, right? And just watching this footage, and because I wasn't allowed to watch TV normally, and because there wasn't a TV, it wasn't on all day long. So these are the kinds of changes that have afflicted the human brain in a very short period of time, and yet our brains don't evolve that quickly. And so we have to learn how to cope with that more readily. And I don't think it's going to help us just to blame social media. We're going to have to develop new strategies across the board of reconnecting with a deeper purpose. But this takes me really to the main theme that I think we should be talking about, which is how do we get people to achieve what they want to do in life earlier, better, and longer? Because that's really the big challenge. And if you think about it to its nth degree, you also have to get into purpose, because you're not going to bother doing all those things if there's no other reason to do it. I'll give you one concrete example. We have a foundation called Health Corps. You know about it, Matt. You've been supportive. It's been in existence for over 20 years. Lisa and I founded it. We've raised over $90 million, touched the lives of millions of kids. We're all over the country. And the big challenge that we're facing right now, because we're trying to teach teens about their bodies, in part because if you can change your body, you can control the world outside of it. It gives you confidence. But at the same time, we're also experiencing something since COVID. It's gotten worse, but it was there beforehand, where young people don't think it really matters if they achieve something in life. So if you don't have a goal, if you don't think that your consciousness changes the world around you, why would you study math? Who cares if you learn math in 9th grade? You and I and most people watching probably got told by somebody along the way that you matter enough that what you learn and the consciousness that evolves from that actually can change the world around you, so you better study math. And so Health Corps is going into schools now, in part for workplace development and preparation, just trying to get young people to appreciate they matter. And that, I think, has been disrupted, that basic awareness, in part because there's been a loss in our society of understanding that something's bigger than us, but also they're distracted from having to think about that. If no one's challenging you to get deeper into why existence is important, then you just go to the TikTok algorithm.
Well, there's also, though, it's great that you're going even more into schools, and you think about for the teenage years. We heard from actor Goldie Hawn, who's been working on mental health issues for a long time.
She helps us in Health Corps, by the way.
Does she?
We take her meditation program into Health Corps schools.
Well, in her thing, she has a documentary out, which is all about how we have to change the connotations of being a teenager. That a lot of times everybody says, oh, they're just a teen, that's why they don't know any better, that's why all of these different things, when in fact, those are the formative years that set the entire course going forward for people.
Well, in Saudi Arabia, where I've been a bunch of times this year, we're looking at programs with the Saudi government to help with both basic well-being of teens but also educating them in a way that allows them to actively play a role in their healthcare system. Because most countries have a real shortage. In America, we need about 2 million more doctors and nurses. Saudi Arabia has a large number as well, and they're growing rapidly. So how do you get young people to engage in some task that they know has a very clear endpoint? It's like trade school for medicine. And I think that's part of the off-ramp from this crisis. And we don't have enough trade schools in the United States. It's certainly an issue that other countries are challenged by as well. But think about the raw material we have with all the 15-year-olds in a country. If we can just get them to understand that there's an electrician's job available for them, where they can be a medical secretary.
But again, back to the question though, if they're spending so much time, let's say in isolation in some way, right? How are they going to get there? What is it that needs to happen to better? I mean, as you said, growing up, you were watching TV, right? If you wanted to entertain yourself, you had to figure out how to entertain yourself. You had to learn, you had to have these experiences. That doesn't seem to be happening nearly at the level today.
Well, this is a deep issue, and I'll embark on it with you. I think part of the crisis of meaning is because we don't think there's anything bigger than us out there. Now, you don't have to call it God. You can call it self, and purpose of life is to actuate, if you're a Jungian psychologist, to connect with who you really are and get rid of the artificial barriers between us and understand there's a deeper consciousness that bonds us all. But there's something bigger than us that if we don't buy into, that nothing else matters. Think about this. Sacrifice, work, committing to something is really making a bargain with your future self, right? I'm wagering that if I don't do something today, I'm going to be better off in 5 years. And I'm also, this is important, betting you think the same thing. So that you're going to sacrifice today so that you'll be better off in 5 years. And if we all do that, then we're all better off, including civilization, in 5 years. But if I don't believe that you believe what I think, that you don't think there's a deal to be made here, you're not going to sacrifice anything. You're going to live life, do anything, whatever you want to do, and enjoy today because you don't care about tomorrow. Then I'm the only schmuck left trying to row the oars in the boat. And then we just row in a circle. And I think that's part of the crisis here. What's allowed humanity to thrive for 50,000 years was this belief that there was something else out there. I'll give you a good example at Göbekli Tepe. It's called Potbelly Hill, but the Turkish translation is Göbekli Tepe. It's the oldest known human civilization. It's almost walking distance from where Abraham met Sarah. So it has deep historical relevance, but this village was created about 12,000 years ago, and they had these big tea temples, these tea sculptures that were, we believe, ancestor worship, but they were reaching towards the skies. They were looking up, thinking there's something else out there. Because of that belief, that audacious belief that they could actually change or connect with someone around them that was bigger than them, they also had the belief they could change the world around them. So they began to domesticate animals. They began to have agriculture, and that became civilization. It's not what I was taught when I was a young person, which is we had some free time because we were able to cultivate crops, so we began to manufacture religion. That's insulting to the role of religion and faith, but it's also wrong, it turns out. If we don't have a belief that we are important enough to, with our own consciousness, create the universe, then nothing else matters as much. Once you appreciate that, you don't watch as much social media. At least you watch a different kind of social media. And that's part of the message here. We can use these tools, whether it's AI, social media, regular television, whatever kind of media you're engaged in, to take ourselves into the rabbit hole, to the darkness, the abyss of nothingness, or we can elevate us and look up and find things that are worth focusing on. And I've seen it happen in our own schools and health corps. I've seen it happen in other countries that have gotten involved in these initiatives because we're not unique with this crisis.
Are we, though, as a country, let's talk specifically from a U.S. side, are we prepared for this new era? And I always go back to the fact you think about in China, where they really celebrate and elevate people who are have good physical fitness, for instance. They have programs where they incentivize things like that. We don't really do that here, right? So are we, as a society today, ready for this new, dramatically changing geopolitical dynamic?
Yes and no. I'll start off with the no, and I'll move to the yes. The reason I say no is there's a lot of hesitation in America about science itself. And many will find that there's almost a religious-like fervor in a belief in what science says. Listen, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, I have great confidence in what my profession can offer, but I don't want to overpromise either. And we learned during COVID that oftentimes there was groupthink in medicine, and scientists often offered advice that really wasn't as accurate as they had hoped, but there was the firmness, the belief that it was so accurate you couldn't challenge it. And so there's a lot of resistance because of that. On the other hand, we're one of the best educated societies on the planet. We certainly about our own bodies. If you go to an average health food store here in New York, you can find lots of fantastic things that make sense. You tried a bunch of them and you're better off for having done it. There's a company called iHerb that you know of. It's the largest online health food store basically in the world. I'm the global advisor for it. We sell those same products all over the planet, 180 countries who don't have access to what we have right here in America. So we have the opportunity because people have made it possible for us to get these things, but will we use them? Will we eat foods that are better for us? You know, what kind of infant formula are we using? What do we feed our pets? It's part of this larger story where America is beginning to elevate their awareness of how these things affect us. If you look at the average list of supplements that are out there, there's a lot more sophistication about what's being used by the average American than ever used to have. People are throwing themselves in cold plunges. Why? There's theoretical reasons that it makes a difference. I personally do it. I like it. But the proof is still coming, but there's enough belief that it's becoming a fad now. Infrared saunas, all these things are part of this larger belief, this panoply of options for people who think longevity is within their grasp. And so I take you back to my original premise that I can get you to work earlier and get you to work better. And that's a big issue because the better part does depend on how you manage your own body, both mental health and physical health. These are things that occupational health experts in America are offering to American employees. You don't get that overseas. One of the big opportunities we have in Saudi Arabia, and I spoke at their big World Congress on Employee Health this year, is to provide that just for their own employees in Saudi Arabia. Forget about surrounding Gulf countries and the region. That doesn't exist in most countries. So we have the opportunity as Americans to export that know-how, that wisdom, and help those countries catch up, maybe even leapfrog us if they do it right.
But to your point, though, there's this gap. There's this, let's call it, you tell me, a trust gap. Yep. Or a lack of confidence, whether it's about science or other things. Does technology and AI, do you think that could lead us on a pathway to preserving that trust because of how AI can help better deliver on some of the things that these institutions, that these different models are supposed to be delivering, but maybe haven't been for a long time?
I don't think AI will hurt us, but people using AI could hurt us. And I think the horse has already left the barn on this issue. We have other countries actively involved in AI research, funding it themselves at the federal level, who are going to develop quantum computing probably before us. Certainly they have advanced AI capabilities. So if we don't loosen our reins and allow scientists who are being audited but moving quickly ahead to figure out how to use AI to help humanity, others who have other purposes and other desires with AI could weaponize it, use it against us. So I think we need to, move from inside the tent and get on the outside and start fighting these battles, because otherwise we're going to be left behind in a world that's going to be dramatically shifted by AI. I don't see any way that our behaviors won't be dramatically driven by AI recommendations in the next 3 to 4 years. Even right now, look at the behavior on search engine platforms, right? You're not going as much as you used to Google or Bing to search for items. You go right to ChatGPT 4.0 and it gives you much more comprehensive responses without having all the ads and all the other stuff that's thrown at you. And if you think about the web, 20, 25 years ago, when we had the first growth and implosion of the web, everyone thought their company would make money with, whatever simplistic idea you had about how the web worked. There was two basic business models, right? There was e-commerce and there was search, advertising. Those are the two ways you make money on the web most of the time. So we're now in a place in AI where we don't really know how people are going to monetize it. But we know they're going to figure it out pretty quickly, and we ought to at least have that technology here. Today in America, we drive probably 90% of the value in these newer technologies. And that's important to our future growth, because the real salvation for America is, yes, we have to spend money, and the debt's going to be a major issue as we do this, because some of the money we're going to spend is not always going to be ideally spent. But if we use our funds to support education at all levels and productivity, right, infrastructure, then our nation will continue to lead and we'll be able to carry a lot of debt. If we don't do those things, then we'll follow the path of many other countries, as Ray Dalio has brilliantly outlined. We don't want to follow in England's footsteps 100 years ago, or the Dutch footsteps 300 years ago. We want to come out of where we are right now stronger than ever before.
But it feels like there's so many conflicting areas. You talk about the potential benefits, positive elements of AI, the negative. We have a government that's not designed to move nearly as fast as technology's advancing, but don't know if we want them to move as fast. Where does all of that kind of crescendo? Where does all that collide at some point?
The smartest people in the room need to be in rooms here, fighting about the role of AI and transparently explaining what they can do. And there's going to be disagreements, there should be.
Does that come from the private sector or does that come from the public sector?
It's got to come from the private sector because you're not going to get those people working in the public sector. But if they're in a room and they're public sector players observing it, I'm thinking about, thoughtful members of Congress, for example, who have domain expertise, who are sort of paying attention to this stuff. We don't want to repeat errors we made before, but we made some pretty big ones. Section 230, I think, is a massive miscalculation that, as you know, gives internet companies the belief that they're fax machines. So they're not liable for what's on them, but that's how you get child sex trafficking. You get bad things happening. And we've got to be able to make decisions, make mistakes sometimes, and then course correct those errors to get back on the right path. But holding back AI from thriving in the United States will be catastrophic. We need it for the military. We need it for drug discovery. We certainly need it for better use of energy. We can platform out all kinds of ideas more wise than anybody else, but not if we're fighting an internecine battle with the belief that it's the AI that's the problem. It's the people using the AI that will be nefarious actors.
You hear a lot of, to your point, the positives and negatives of AI. Doesn't it have an incredibly positive transformational effect on healthcare?
Without question, AI is going to not only adjust healthcare massively, but I think it'll do it in a very positive direction because we have a little bit more of an ability to audit what's going on. So think about this. We have the ability, and I think I got to go back to Sandbox AQ as an example because it's a major focus, to generate not just large language models, but large quantitative models. By that I mean, it's not just trolling through all the Twitter feed to figure out what the large language model predicts as an answer to your question about what's the best restaurant. But I can actually have equations written that predict how water molecules dance around proteins as they fold. Now I can start to do drug discovery. I can also look at already existing drugs and decide, could they help us in other areas we never thought possible? What if a drug that you take for hair loss works for cancer? Right? If you can predict that, and also the success of trials and which ones won't cause damage to, unfortunately, collateral damage, that's a wonderful way of accelerating drug discovery, saving a lot of money in the process and helping a lot of people. We're going to use those same technologies to develop new types of metals that could help us. Some of them have military applications. Many of them will have medical applications as well. So across the board, we have opportunities, but maybe the greatest of all is to help the doctor and the patient speak again, because that system is not evolved in hundreds of years. When you go to your doctor's office, you're sort of in a black box. There's not a lot of education that takes place there. There's some great companies making inroads there, like Patient Point puts little monitors in doctor's offices. So to help, but to really up the game, we need to get in there and help patients with AI that can customize the recommendations they're getting so they can use it more effectively. And that's all right at our fingertips if we use it wisely.
Is AI going to be the single most impactful driver of preventative medicine as well? Is that, eventually are we going to be able to do something to then see exactly what's going to happen to our bodies over the next few decades?
So Matt, it's a great question. You should do this for a living, I'm going to FII, the Davos in the Desert, so-called, the Riyadh, Saudi Arabia meeting, where they talk about some of these big concepts. And I'm helping with the longevity session. And that's my big message, that for us to truly provide customized preventive care, I've got to know a lot about you that you don't even know that you know about you. For example, how does your gut flora affect your ability to resist infections? Now, to do that, I've got to understand a ton of different ecosystems because your gut bacteria, and there are trillions of them. You have more bacteria in your gut than cells in your body. How can you possibly figure out? That's true.
That's crazy.
How can you possibly figure out what all those bacteria are doing there and whether they're in a good place or they change from season to season? They change based on whether you had gastroenteritis last week, or you took antibiotics for a sore throat. So to customize just in that little area, I've got a lot to do. But then all of our methylation pathways are different. Our age, of course, changes a lot of what naturally happens with prevention. So for me to get into Matt Swift and understand all your single nucleotide polymorphisms, your genetic baseline, your epigenetics, your bowel flora, your skin flora, the stuff's going on in your eyes and your mouth, all that wraps together. I can say, you know what? You ought to be on a methylated B vitamin. I can't say that right now. But you might not have to be on it next week. So you're going to be holding someone equivalent to an avatar, someone like me in your pocket saying, I like the way he talks to me. I like his attitude. It's funny. It's got a little, everybody's on his game. So I'll get my advice from him. And I'll also know when to tell you. Because right after you had a fight with someone you care about, or your dad gave you a hard time, you don't want to get advice from anybody else. So there's sometimes you want to hear the advice. Sometimes you want a lot of it. Sometimes none of it. And all that will come around. And we'll also be able to make different items that will be directly beneficial to you, Matt Swift. And that's how we'll actually deal with the preventive issue. Because right now I shotgun it. I give you advice. It's probably right for 80% of people. For 20% of people, if it is right, it's not that important. The 80-20 rule is true in medicine as well.
I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here in New York this week. It's the UN General Assembly. It's a unique week for the world. It's a time when the majority of the world's heads of state are all within about 30 blocks of one another. Are institutions like the United Nations able to keep up with everything we've just been talking about alone? Are they designed for this era?
The United Nations, I think, was created to deal with the post-war crisis that the whole world faced. And in 1946, when a lot of very smart, utopia-desiring leaders got together for the UN, it made a ton of sense, and it could keep up because it was moving at the speed of communications at that era. It's become much more challenged, but it's the best we got. And I would make the argument that it's a lot easier to burn down institutions like the UN than it is to rebuild them. So treasure what you got. It's sort of like family, right? And, you often ask, why do you fight so much with your family? Because if you weren't related, you wouldn't be friends.
Yeah.
Right? But you're stuck because they're your family. We are ultimately the same family. And I'm not just speaking philosophically, literally. So we are connected. So I can't get out of this without you. It's a classic prisoner's dilemma, right? We're both basically handcuffed and shackled next to each other over a cliff. So there's no benefit for me hurting you unless I don't mind hurting myself. And there's some instances where that's the case, where some communities have been so traumatized that they hate your kids and they hate you more than they love their own kids. And that's a problem, a pathology, and that we've got to address. But that's not where most people are. When I was campaigning for the U.S. Senate, I got to meet a lot of people. The vast majority thought their personal lives were actually okay, but they're really worried about their neighbors. They saw them as having a really bad time, and maybe they were dangerous, and maybe they're not on the same team, or they don't think they want to be on the same team. Well, if most people actually think that they can form a team and bond and deal with today's crises together, that's a fact that we should respect, not manufacture an alternative reality where we think most people don't want to be a part of the same team. Most folks got what they got in life because they figured out how to make relationships work. We can actually do that at scale. And there's definitely bad players who are using social media and other tools to disrupt us from that, and we shouldn't be conned by that, which is why I think I'll say very clearly that the biggest message I have to deliver today, and what I think Concordia offers us, is think for yourself. Don't just believe stuff that's been spoon-fed to you because there might be bad actors behind it. It's not that you're paranoid, but as when Kissinger was being evaluated for to be Secretary of State, he was asked about Nixon. He said, even paranoid people have enemies. He said, there's some bad players out there, but the deeper reality is most people are not bad players. And it's going to be the good actors that play forward. And sitting on the sidelines, to me,
no longer an option.
No, not an option, but it's also, that's where true evil is.
Yeah.
Because the dividing line between good and evil goes right through our hearts. We each have a little bit of bad, and we each have a lot of good, and we've got to find a way of making humanism our guiding light forward.
Well, Dr. Mehmet, thank you so much for joining the Swift Hour. It's great to be with you.
It's a great honor.